Hey y'all, and welcome to another very exciting tutorial. My name's Luke, and in this tutorial I'll show you a great method for making this fantastic country road running through the forest. It's much easier than it looks, so let's not waste any more time and get started making this great diorama. First off, you're going to need some materials. I'm using the Woodland Scenics Road system for this road. This is a list of the items I used. Feel free to pause if you need more time to look, or you can look in the description for the list of materials. On the back of the Woodland Scenics Paving Tape package, you'll find a guide for modelling specific road types. I'm going to make a country road, so I'll need it to be 20 scale feet wide, which is 2 3/4 inches or 7 centimeters in HO scale. To mark out the path of the road, I fashion up a jig which will help me get an accurate width. Basically, I use a scrap piece of foam and create 2 holes exactly 7 centimeters apart. Then simply push 2 pencils through. I test it just to make sure it's the width I'm after. My road has a straight section before a curve. For the straight, simply use a ruler as a guide and draw directly onto the foam. The curve is drawn freehand, which is a little trickier. It might take a couple of goes before you're happy. Next is the paving tape. The box itself acts as a dispenser, which is handy. It's very easy to use. Just peel away the backing tape to reveal the sticky surface and press the tape down, following the line as a guide. I take my time just to make sure I get a nice straight line, and finally trim the excess tape from the edge. Before applying the Smooth It plaster, I roughen up the surface of the foam. Plaster doesn't stick very well to the smooth foam, which has its positives, but for getting the road to stick, it's not so good. The Smooth It gets mixed to a ratio of 1 part water and 2 parts Smooth It. Let it soak for 2 minutes before giving it a thorough mix for a further 2 minutes. Pour the mixture out between the road markings and use the spreader, which is provided in the same box as the paving tape. Spread the mixture out until it covers the entire area where the road will be. Don't worry if a little spills over the edge, we can clean that up later. Sometimes you might get a bubble. They are easily removed by popping them with your finger, then fill them in with more Smooth It and go over the area with the spreader. You might notice the surface isn't perfectly smooth after fixing the bubble, but don't worry, as small surface imperfections will be removed once the road has dried. Allow the Smooth It to dry for approximately an hour or so, then carefully remove the paving tape. The overspill can be removed with a finger or some type of scraper, and then leave the road to dry for at least another 24 hours. While the road dries, I can do some sculpting of the scenery around the road. As I've shown in a few previous videos, I like to use the foam to build up small hills, which gets glued in position with Gorilla Glue. Before gluing, I roughen up the surface and dampen the area with a wet cloth. Remember to weigh it down as the glue dries, because Gorilla Glue expands as it sets. In preparation for the rest of the landscaping, I roughen up the rest of the foam surface, then cover the entire area with sculptor mould. I try to ensure there are high spots and low spots in the sculptor mould, as the area I'm modelling is a rough forest floor, which is rarely flat or smooth. To add a bit of interest, I'll include a rock outcropping. Be sure to wet the rock before pressing it into the wet plaster. That way it will get a better and stronger bond with the sculptor mould, and then work the sculptor mould around the rock to help it blend in. Then, once finished, you can leave everything to dry. To fix up those small imperfections we had in the road, I'll give the entire surface a light sanding, starting with a fine grade sandpaper. Try not to press too hard, it doesn't take much to completely sand the road away. I then follow with another sanding with an ultra fine grade to further smooth the surface. Before painting the road, be sure to clean away the plaster dust from sanding. The initial colour for the road will be the Woodland Scenics Asphalt top coat. I give the road a good coating and don't worry about getting it on the surrounding scenery. Just be sure to completely cover the surface, then let it dry. For the main road texture and colour, I'll be using a sponge to apply the paint. The rubber band helps me get a nice rounded base, which helps prevent hard lines when stippling the paint onto the surface with the sponge. I mix a ratio of 3 parts Woodland Scenics concrete with 1 part asphalt and mix that thoroughly. To apply the paint, first dip the sponge in the saucer, then press the sponge onto the paper to remove most of the paint before lightly pressing the sponge onto the road surface. You only need a very small amount of paint. It's easy to add more paint, but very hard to remove excess, unwanted paint. Keep applying paint this way until you're satisfied with the colour. For the centre of each lane, I apply a slightly darker mix with the smaller sponge. Now for the road details. The lines are applied using the Flexi Edge and the road striping pen, both from Woodland Scenics. Give the pen a good shake prior to use, and to get the paint flowing, you can press the nib of the pen down on some paper. Simply line up the Flexi Edge and use it like a ruler to guide the road striping pen. In this case, I'm using the yellow pen, but you can also get the pen in white. To do the centre, I discreetly mark the centre of the road with the black felt tip pen, then using the Flexi Edge, line it up and apply the yellow paint at the marked intervals. In this case, it's the yellow HO scale markings. Now this is where the Flexi Edge really comes in handy. Simply bend it to the curve radius. It will hold its shape, so all you need to do is hold it in position and draw the desired line. The Flexi Edge is also designed to prevent the paint from bleeding under it as you apply the paint due to the raised surface on all the edges of the tool. Unlike a normal ruler where the yellow paint tends to creep under the ruler as the paint's applied, which leaves you with a very messy line. It's easy enough to touch up lines freehand if needed. A few of my lines were a little dull, so I touched them up with the second coat. If however you do make a mistake, you can use the road stripe remover to dissolve the yellow road stripe, then press a paper towel to lift the paint away. Just be aware that the road base coat could also be removed, which may require some touching up. To add road patches and repairs, simply cut a template using some paper, and then with full strength asphalt top coat and the small sponge, place the template in the area you want and apply the paint lightly until you get the look you're after. You can experiment with all sorts of shapes. Another detail we can add now are cracks. I use a thin felt tip pen and lightly drag it across the road where I want a crack to appear. I also outline the repair patches with the felt tip marker as well. Now it's time to build up the rest of the scenery. In a similar fashion to the other tutorials, I colour the rocks and give the entire diorama a coat of earth coloured paint, whilst being careful to avoid getting the paint on the road and the rocks. In preparation for the dirt texture, we'll need to mask the road. It's easy enough to do this with a paper towel or some paper. The dirt texture is a 50-50 mix of sifted soil mixed with canvas coloured grout, and it gets applied through a stocking to get a good even texture. I firstly paint the surface with a lightly diluted Mod Podge mixture, however avoid covering the rock details. This will help the dirt stick to the small hills and raised surfaces without sliding to the bottom of the hill. Then coat the surface with the dirt texture. I carefully go around the rocks, but a little dirt over the rock surface looks good. To fix this layer in place, I wet the area with alcohol, then saturate the diorama with scenic glue. Make sure you remove the paper towel from the road before it has a chance to dry. To get great looking and realistic road shoulders, I'll use some of the Woodland Scenics gravel. It has a very fine grain which is perfect for modelling the road shoulder. I apply it very similar to how I would apply ballast to a track, going right along the length of the road. You can then go along and smooth out any rough spots with a flat dry brush, and be sure to remove any unwanted rocks from the main road surface. There are a couple of ways you can apply the glue. The first method uses a pipette. First wet the area with the alcohol, then apply the glue. It's a little more time consuming, but you can get a very accurate application of glue. The second method is much faster, however also quite messy. In a similar fashion, apply the alcohol using the spray bottle, and then go over the area again with the glue also applied using the spray bottle. Again, ensure you soak up any glue that gets on the road surface. Now the real transformation starts to happen, adding the scenery. I usually say start with low-lying bushes and shrubs when applying scenery, however with this diorama, we want the tree positions marked out first so I know where to apply scenery below each tree. I also start planning out where the static grass tufts will be placed now as well. You can get a little creative and experiment with the position of each tree as you go along. If you want to know how to make these trees, be sure to check out the Tall Forest Pine Trees tutorial. There's also a couple of tutorials you can watch about making your own static grass applicator, as well as making these types of static grass tufts. The dead trees you can see are dried asparagus fern. I also have a tutorial for using these as pine tree armatures and adding foliage, but they also look great as dead tree armatures. All the links will be in the description of the video. Now it's just a matter of marking out the tree positions. This is actually quite easy. Using some tape and some pins, I make enough small flags for each tree. I then create a grid on a spare piece of foam with each position marked appropriately. One by one I remove each tree and replace it with a numbered flag, whilst placing that tree on the foam in the numbered position that corresponds to that flag number. Try not to move the static grass as you do this, and you'll end up with a diorama that looks like this. Next I glue the static grass tufts in place with full strength Mod Podge. You may need to press your finger down on them to get the tuft to conform to the uneven scenery, but don't worry, the static grass is quite resilient and will straighten up again after you remove your finger. To help blend the static grass tufts into the surrounding scenery, I apply shorter 2mm static grass. This is a blend of late autumn and early autumn from Mini Nature. Before applying the glue, I make sure the static grass applicator is ready to go. The grass fibres are glued and held using full strength Mod Podge. I only work in small areas at a time, and I thoroughly apply the glue in and around the static grass tufts. Next, simply use the applicator and shake lightly over the glue. I'm using a long extension wire to touch the negative wire from the applicator to the glue. That way I can move around easily to get maximum effect from the applicator. Continue applying grass in small areas until the diorama is covered. This is going to be a forest setting, so I'd expect a fair bit of deadfall and leaves to be on the ground. This mixture here is actually ground up leaves using a blender. There's also a video tutorial for this as well, and I use this material on nearly all of my dioramas. Basically, I apply it all over the model, but I tend to focus on areas that will be underneath the trees. You'll also see a lot of fallen branches. These are just fine twigs gathered up from the garden and scattered around the diorama. I also place some larger trunks to add detail as well. Small shrubs are made using Woodland Scenics coarse turf, medium green, and slightly larger bushes are made with the Woodland Scenics clump foliage. The saplings are fine leaf foliage also from Woodland Scenics, but I also planted some of the small twigs from the garden to indicate dead saplings and small dead trees, all of which are fixed in position with Mod Podge. Now with all the ground cover in place, we need to secure it. Again, I mask the road, and then using the alcohol first, I wet the area down and then come in with the diluted Mod Podge and apply the glue with the spray bottle. For more information about the wetting process and making the scenic glue, check out these videos. Remember to remove the mask straight after applying the glue because it will stick to the road quite fast. Once that dries, we can come in and replace the trees. Simply pick out each numbered tree and place it back in its allocated position. Then when you're happy, you can glue them into position. In an attempt to get the base of each tree to sit flush with the terrain, I remove some of the ground scatter. However, the terrain isn't completely flat. There are small hills and slopes, so to help blend the trunk into the scenery, I use a moderate amount of glue on the base and the pin of the tree, so as I lower and press the tree into position, the glue oozes out from under the trunk. Then I come in with my ground up leaves and bark and build it up around the base of the tree. This final layer will need to be fixed into position as well, and again, simply pre-wet the area with alcohol and apply the scenic glue. Sometimes the glue will dry and cause the leaves to dry a darker colour. To help lighten the leaves under the tree and also blend them in a little better to the surrounding scenery, I lightly dust the area using a soft dry brush and some burnt sienna pastel. And as a final step, you can add small details to help give the diorama a time period and location. I've decided to add this Yellowstone park sign. You can also add people, cars and road signs, which all help build focal points and areas of interest and will help set the time period. That completes Realistic Scenery Volume 5. If you really enjoy these videos and wish to help support more videos like this, please be sure to check out my Patreon page. Cheers and thanks for watching.